I'm really happy to welcome our first speaker, Julia Wolfe. She's from the Economic Policy Institute. She's a state economic analyst. I found her because some of the research that she's been doing was quoted in the SACB article, doing a lot around job loss and job trends. So I invited her to speak with us today. Really happy to have you. I'm gonna turn it over to you and you're gonna address what's happening with jobs right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Wolfe. I work at the Economic Policy Institute based out of DC, and I do economic research on state policy and coordinate a network of progressive state policy groups across the country, including quite a few groups in California. So I'm just going to go ahead and give an overview of what we've seen so far. I don't think any of this will be surprising to you, but it is still shocking. And I'll talk a little bit about what we've seen so far and then what we'll expect to see next. So yes, thank you. So I think everyone has probably seen some version of this really unfortunate chart, which shows the incredible spike in unemployment insurance claims that we saw in just 2 weeks. So 3 weeks ago, there were 3.3 million initial claims filed. And then the week after that, that number doubled to 6.6 million. So far in these 2 weeks alone, 10 million people have filed initial unemployment insurance claims. And that dwarfs anything that we've seen since the Department of Labor has been tracking this by an incredible amount. We also estimate that's not shown here, but about 3.5 million of these unemployment insurance claims also represent workers who lost their employer-provided health insurance as a result of their job loss. And so that represents about 2/3 of these claims in this 2-week period. And the only reason 1/3, it only represents 1/3. And the reason that's so low is because we're seeing industries hit where workers didn't have these benefits to begin with, but still that represents like a huge loss of health insurance at a time when people really need it the most. And then we can go to the next slide and talk about the states. So in this 2-week period that we've been talking about, every single state posted a record number of unemployment insurance claims. No one was left behind there, unfortunately. And so this map kind of gets at the intensity of the claim. It shows the percentage change in this 2-week period. And so you can see states like Michigan, Indiana were hit particularly hard. And I just want to point out that just because some of these states are looking paler on the map, the low end of the scale is still showing an 800% increase in unemployment insurance claims. So the low of Wyoming was still an 800% increase. And then also another thing to point out about this chart is that some states, like for Nevada, for example, look a little lighter, or Washington, but that's just because they were getting hit a little bit earlier. So that percentage change doesn't look as extreme, but it still is a really bad picture for them. And in the last week alone of unemployment insurance claims, California, Pennsylvania, New York, and Michigan each individually saw more claims in 1 week than the entire country saw 2 weeks before this hit. So it's happening incredibly quickly and at incredibly high levels. And so this represents not only job loss, but it represents a huge strain on administratively on these systems of trying to get these workers their lost wages, and they're just not built to handle this volume of demand. And they've really kind of been, those systems have been worn down in most states over the years to a point where they probably couldn't have even dealt with a Great Recession type filing of unemployment insurance claims. And so this is really unfortunate. And then we can see some industry detail if we go to the next slide. So this is the most current information we have on the job losses by industry. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics monthly jobs report that they put out. And I just want to note that this data is really only tracking like the middle of March. So it's really only getting the beginning of what we're starting to see here. But what it shows us is something that I think most of us knew intuitively was happening, is that the leisure and hospitality sectors are getting hit incredibly hard by this. That's where you see restaurants, bars, museums, parks, amusement parks, hotels. Those are the things that fall into that category, and those are the places that need to close for public health measures or dramatically cut back their staff and just be having to-go service or whatever. And so it absolutely devastating losses there, and this is only the beginning. This is only capturing the very beginning of it. Yeah, and then on the next slide, I'll just talk quickly about kind of what we expect to see going forward. So this map comes from a projection that we did based on the Goldman Sachs on one of their most recent estimates of how much GDP we expect to lose. And based on that estimate, we are expecting that by summer alone, we'll see around 20 million jobs lost. And there's a lot of reasons why that might be kind of a conservative estimate, and things could actually be a lot worse than that. We've already seen 10 million unemployment insurance claims so far. We don't even know what happened last week. But based on these estimates that just kind of keep getting worse, our most recent guess is that about 20 million jobs will be lost by summer. And this map kind of shows how we expect that to be distributed by states. And the way that we're projecting that is we're expecting this analysis to be really broad-based and hit most industries. We're expecting it to kind of reach all corners of the economy, but we do still expect leisure, hospitality, and retail as well to be hit kind of fastest and hardest. And so this kind of splits the difference and says, in states like Nevada, like Hawaii, where we see them really rely on tourism, they're going to be a little bit harder hit, but we really still do expect all states, all sectors to be hit really hard by that. So that's what I have so far, but looking forward to hearing any specific questions you have on this data. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia, and that is very sobering data. One question I have is, do you have a sense of, a lot of this is about job loss, but I'm also reading in the news some about job shifts. So are there ways that there are employers who are hiring up right now? I know that, for example, in grocery, there's hiring going on. Are people being redeployed in different ways? Is that data that you've seen at all?
Yeah, so that is a great question. And unfortunately, the data on that isn't great so far. We have a lot of data to look forward to where we'll really get to dig into that. For example, the labor turnover survey that BLS puts out, but that's like on quite a bit of a lag, and we only have February so far for that. What we did see in the jobs report for this month, for the month of March, which again is kind of like looking in the rear view mirror, two places that I did notice upticks that I would say are probably related to this are in general merchandise stores. So that's your big box retailers like Walmart or Target. I didn't see an uptick in grocery stores specifically, although I wouldn't be surprised by that going forward. Also in warehousing and storage is another place where there was a bit of an uptick last month in employment. And so I think that would be a shift we would likely see going forward. And we're definitely seeing that in the news, that these workers have increasing demands put on them and that they're kind of coming out with important demands of their own for protection, etc.
Good. Yeah, thanks. So another question I have is kind of this idea of, we know that we're in crisis right now. We know there's very significant economic impacts, even probably, going into summer, which is what your slide is here. Do you have a sense of what changes might kind of get back to normal once everything opens up again versus changes that might be more long-term or long-lasting?
Mm-hmm. So one change that I think we can work towards making happen at the end, or one that will kind of allow us to recover quicker, is right now a huge, as we've seen, a huge base of our economy is in these service sectors. It relies on people going out and having fun and eating food and going to the movies. And if throughout this process, people are losing their jobs and losing income and not getting that replaced by any sort of intervention, that then at the end of this, we're going to see when people finally can go out and spend money, they want to go out and have fun again finally, they won't be able to if they don't have any money to spend. So I'm not sure which way that'll go just now. I'm not super optimistic that we'll be able to bounce back right away. I'm not super optimistic about our will to replace people's income throughout this crisis. And so then we could end up seeing these really lasting closures of businesses, especially small businesses, restaurants, etc., which would be unfortunate.
And I see some questions have come in from the audience. And Emma, I think you were going to help staff those questions. Can you point us to any, or can you read for us any questions that have come in?
Yeah, so there was a question here from Jason. What are the expected impacts on logistics and transportation jobs? You mentioned short-term uptick. Are we expecting a huge long-term drop due to the recession even when stores do open?
Yeah, it's hard to speculate. Again, if we see this long-term decrease in demand, then there's going to end up being a decrease in demand for that supply chain all along the way and for those jobs throughout the process. Because even if people still need to buy groceries, and that creates jobs for truck drivers to be hauling those across the country, if they're not also hauling that to restaurants, that's ultimately going to be a drop in demand. I do think, of course, we're seeing people ordering many things to be delivered to them now, and I was actually surprised to not see an uptick in the couriers job category in last month's jobs report, but that would be one that I would absolutely keep watching, that transportation and warehousing sector in every jobs report. I'll be interested to see what happens.
Awesome. And just, we have time for one more, Evan?
Sure.
Okay. Is there a forecast for local and state government employment in California?
I do not have one of those. One of our state partners might. I don't have one offhand, but that would be really interesting. And one thing that you definitely saw during the Great Recession was state and local governments' budgets really being strained by responding to that and by the loss of revenue that they see go along with people's loss of income. And then the result was cuts in terms of public sector employment and in terms of pensions. And now that, cutting public sector jobs that might be administrating things like unemployment insurance, and then seeing us in the situation we're in is not a great thing. And so, and that's something I would really hope to see in this fourth package from Congress, is a lot more aid for state and local governments so we don't make the same mistakes again, especially in terms of public sector employment.
Great, thanks. And I think one thing we saw from the recession recently was that Sacramento was a little bit insulated because of our state government focus here. And so I think there's might be a possibility there as well. All right, well, thank you so much for your presentation. Really sobering to hear the numbers and the data, but I do think it's important to kind of be moving forward with our eyes wide open. And what I'd like to do now is kind of turn to those who are here in the region to talk about the impact that it's having across different sectors. And Julia, I hope you can stay with us.